But now I'm going to move on to the core of my speech. What does it mean when we talk about global Korea? What does being a global player actually mean?
In other words, we can't simply return to the strategies of the past. Jobs and industries can move to any country with an internet connection and willing workers. Now, there are some who believe that we must try to turn back the clock on this new world. I disagree. Not only is it impossible to turn back the tide of globalization, but efforts to do so can actually make us worse off. So rather than fear the future, we have to embrace it.
We're living in an unprecedented era of globalization, spurred on by rapid technological advances. Countries are now truly interdependent. Globalization has created shared interests and shared threats that necessitate deeper obligations between states and their citizens. It requires a different type of international politics and a certain type of global leadership. Both Britain and Korea have received many benefits from globalization. Korea has seen a rapid economic growth fueled by an export-orientated economic strategy. The UK has seen globalization drive structural economic changes for us that will support our future economic prospects. Foreign capital in the UK has tackled the lack of long-term investment from weak savings. Foreign talent has filled gaps in skills and management expertise. Foreign products at competitive prices have helped to keep inflation down. But to share in the benefits of globalization, countries also need to share the cost and the responsibility of maintaining those benefits. This requires a concept of national interest that includes responsibility for safeguarding the health of the international system. The international public goods that maintain the benefits of globalization, economic growth, regional stability, international peace and security, environmental health, need to be protected by the international community together. Global players will need to take the lead in these efforts. So with this in mind, I'd argue that a global player and a global Korea needs to include the following three objectives within its foreign policy aims. So firstly, the safeguarding of global security. In an interdependent world, our national prosperity requires stability and security. This includes traditional security threats, such as conflict, terrorism and proliferation. Our security and stability are threatened by health and environmental problems which do not respect. A global player contributes to tackling and minimizing these threats within an international framework. Secondly, as the recent financial crisis has shown, countries must take an international outlook to economic growth and stability, advancing prosperity across borders. Economic growth in other countries matters to the rest of us more than ever before. Instability is contagious. Countries must advance an international prosperity agenda that supports free trade and contributes towards the economic development of other countries. And then finally, a global player needs to uphold and support the international values of human rights, tolerance, and the rule of law. In its treatment of its own citizens and in its engagement around the world, sovereign states have responsibilities that are enshrined by a set of universal values as set out in the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When human rights abuses go unchecked, our security and prosperity suffer as well. The uprisings in the Middle East and North Africa demonstrate the huge consequences of suppressing people's basic and fundamental rights. In Britain, we certainly try to put support for human rights at the centre of our foreign policy. We believe the support is in our own long-term economic interest. Countries prepared to abuse their own people are unlikely to be stable and reliable economic partners. We also need to be accountable to our own population. British citizens now ask hard questions about countries we're trading with. They want to know about health and labour standards, ethics and foreign policy decisions. I'm now going to take each of those three issues in turn and explore what this means in practice for British and Korean foreign policy. So, security on the Korean Peninsula. Firstly, the responsibility to maintain global peace and security. Korea, of course, has a unique perspective. 60 years ago, in the face of aggression from the DPRK, the international community, under the flag of the UN, intervened to protect the Republic of Korea's sovereignty. Britain was the second largest foreign contributor to this international effort to repel the invasion, providing 58,000 troops. Next week, in fact, 100 British veterans of the Korean War and their families will return to the Republic of Korea. These visits are always personal highlights of the year for me. It's very moving to talk with these veterans, reflecting on the sacrifices made 60 years ago. They're returning to see a country that has made massive political and economic progress. As a result of the UN intervention in 1950, the Republic of Korea is now a global economic power with a population that enjoys democratic freedoms and benefits from the rule of law. Members of the international community, including Britain, have an ongoing role in maintaining security on the Korean Peninsula. Britain is a member of the UN Command Military Armistice Commission, monitoring the armistice agreement on the peninsula. Britain is also a strong supporter of the Republic of Korea in the face of continuing aggression from the DPRK. Last year, we strongly condemned the sinking of the Cheonan and sent naval and forensic experts from the British government to the international team investigating the sinking. Now to move outside the peninsula. Despite these difficulties closer to home, the Republic of Korea is becoming an increasingly active player in tackling traditional security threats outside the Korean Peninsula. Britain and Korea have made contributions to the promotion of global peace and security by carrying out operations in parts of the world such as East Timor, Iraq and Somalia. As President Lee said last month, Korean armed forces have taken a leap forward in defending world peace. Britain welcomes Korea's deployment of troops and reconstruction experts to Parwan province in Afghanistan, which is important to the efforts to bring stability there, and we welcome Korea's wider contribution to UN peacekeeping operations globally. Now, as for UN peacekeeping, I'm just trying to see if it's actually legible. Only just. I think the people at the back are going to have a problem with that. It's also not quite in focus, I think. But this map shows where British and Korean troops have been deployed in the UN's name since official UN peacekeeping deployments began. UN peacekeeping continues to evolve both conceptually and operationally to meet new challenges and political realities. Faced with the rising demand for increasingly complex peace operations, the United Nations in the past few years has been overstretched and challenged as never before. The organisation has worked vigorously to strengthen its capacity to manage and sustain field operations, and thus contribute to the most important function of the United Nations, maintaining international peace and security. There are many examples of where international peacekeeping efforts have made a real difference to securing peace and stability and to improving the lives of peoples affected by conflict. It's important that Korea and the UK continue to use their economic and political influence to support the UN in this goal. Britain and Korea have this strong shared history and share important priorities today. That reinforces our duty of responsible sovereignty, including the need to enhance peace and security within the international community. We have a collective responsibility to protect populations from crimes against humanity. As well as maintaining peace and security and stability in a traditional sense, through military interventions and peacekeeping, global players also need to tackle the serious risk of nuclear proliferation. It's crucial that global players uphold and enforce the international non-proliferation regime. The UN Security Council has formally recognised the threat to non-proliferation posed by Iran through its decision last year to impose further sanctions on the country. It's been challenging for Korea to respond to these sanctions that Iran is a large supplier of oil imports and an export market for Korean goods. But the risks to Korea's energy security would be far greater if Iran were to develop nuclear weapons. A nuclear-armed Iran could induce Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and others to reconsider their decisions not to develop nuclear weapons. If they did so, the breakdown in the non-proliferation regime would hasten. Tensions would rise in the Persian Gulf, putting at risk the entire global energy market. It's very important for Korea to play a strong role in implementing the sanctions regime against Iran and other proliferating states of concern. If we fail to work in concert now, together we will face serious consequences later.